My God, I almost turned off my computer. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Voting and COVID-19 panel. Today, we are going to be talking about the importance of voting, but also how to take care of yourself and things to look out for during a pandemic. I'm going to go ahead and give it away to Sabrina so that she can introduce herself. And we'll kind of just keep this casual and popcorn before we do our presentation with Commissioner Stout.
Everybody, thank you so much, Dom, for passing it over. My name is Sabrina Bustillos, and I work for Texas Rising, which is like a baby organization of the Texas Freedom Network. And we're all about advocacy. We're centered around educating, young people exiting high school into college about political issues that impact them. So we do a lot of work with voting and advocacy. Sorry, I'm
Hi, I'm Daisy Gomez-Cigarroa, and I am the voting rights organizer for Common Cause Texas. Common Cause is a grassroots, nonpartisan organization that works to ensure that democracy is for everyone. And I'm gonna popcorn it to Trayshawn.
Hey everybody, my name is Trayshawn Pate. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I am a policy and advocacy strategist with the ACLU of Texas. I mostly focus on voting rights and LGBTQ rights, and I'm going to popcorn it over to Dominique.
Awesome. Again, just moderating. I am the vice president of the El Paso Young Democrats, and I'll go ahead and popcorn it off to Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Peña. I'm co-founder and research director of Know My Ballot. Know My Ballot is a local organization created by a few El Pasoans just with the purpose of trying to inform and educate our community about people that are running for positions and just kind of like inform them of their platform and anything voting related. So I'll send it back to you, Dominic.
Thank you so much. Before I hand it over to Commissioner Stout, I want to thank each and every single one of you for all the hard work that you are doing, especially during one, pandemic, and second, a election that is probably the most important in our lives. So thank you all again. Commissioner Stout, the floor is yours to introduce yourself and then give your brief speech and presentation.
All right, let me unmute myself here. Everybody can hear me. Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this event. Thanks to the El Paso Young Democrats and the other organizations that are represented here. It's great to see young folks getting involved and being informed and helping the community to do the same thing. My name is David Stout. I am the county commissioner that represents Precinct 2. So Precinct 2 is basically all of central El Paso, half of the Northeast, a little bit on the west side between where I-10 and Mesa meet downtown to where they meet on the west side. And then it runs along the border with Mexico out to Yarborough and up to Alameda. So I like to say I have all the important things, the best precinct I have downtown. I have Fort Bliss, I have Ascarate Park, I have the Medical Center of the Americas, the Children's Hospital, University Medical Center, Sunland Park, all the shopping centers, the fountains, Cielo Vista, Bassett, and so that's what I represent. That's the area that I represent. But I'm very excited to be speaking to you all tonight and have a presentation because the county is the local government governmental agency that runs the elections. And so I'll go ahead and kind of set the stage for the discussion. Obviously, we're here because we all care about voting, we care about elections, and because we have a very significant election coming up here in November. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'll jump to the next slide. Sorry, there we go. That's it. Okay. So let me get back to my notes here. The November 3rd presidential election is only 47 days away. And that means that folks have only until October 5th to register to vote. This slide here shows you some important dates to keep in mind. That means that the last day also to apply for a mail-in ballot is October 23rd. And it has to be received by October 23rd by the elections department at the county, not postmarked. So that's an important distinction. It also means that early voting will begin on October 13th this year. Next slide, please. Okay, just quickly to go over who qualifies for ballots by mail in the state of Texas. We live in Texas, and here obviously we have a legislature that doesn't like to make things easy for people to vote. And so that means that unfortunately we cannot just blanket send everyone a ballot. And not everybody in the state of Texas is eligible to vote by mail. I know that there are other states that allow that, but Texas is not one of those states. So in order to be eligible to vote by mail, you have to be, number one, a registered voter. You have to be 65 years of age or older, be out of the country on election day and during the period of early voting, be sick or disabled, or be confined in jail but eligible. Next slide, please. So some frequently asked questions about voting by mail are answered here. So when can one expect to receive their ballot? Ballots are going to be mailed beginning September 25th. That means that some folks in El Paso will get their ballots as early as the 26th or the 27th of September. However, most folks should expect to receive it by no later than October 3rd. And when do we have to return those mail-in ballots? That's a great question. As soon as possible. The post office says that they anticipate a 7 to 10 day processing time. So please, please don't wait. If you have family members that are going to be requesting ballots and they get them, tell them to send it back in as soon as they possibly can. Ballots must be received by elections department by 7 p.m. on November 3rd, 2020. So what does it cost to mail a ballot? The elections department recommends that at least 70 cents for postage. However, if you live in the city of Socorro, you should anticipate spending $1.40 because their ballot is going to be 5 pages. What if you want to drop off the ballot or don't have postage? There is a drop-off site. You will need to personally drop off your ballot, and you have to show an acceptable form of ID. And we know that that's also because of the leadership in our state recently passed a voter ID law that makes things a little more difficult for folks. So, and speaking of making things difficult, unfortunately, the only place that you can drop a ballot off is at the courthouse. I know that there are other states as well that have numerous drop-off points, but here in the state of Texas, we are only allowed to drop it off where the elections clerk is located, which is the courthouse. That location is 500 East San Antonio Avenue, downtown. If y'all don't know, it's the big glass building that looks kind of bluish greenish. There will be a drop-off line and spots located on the east side of the building off of Campbell Street. So to verify that your ballot has been received, once you've mailed it in, you can call 915-834-8222, and that line is going to be operational beginning September 28th. And remember that the Postal Service is advising 7 to 10 days of processing time. Next slide, please. So what if you change your mind and you want to vote in person after you've already requested a a mail-in ballot. What you'll have to do is take your ballot to the polling place and surrender it. If you don't have the ballot, you will need to cast a provisional and do it that way. So what will the ballot look like? It's by law, it will arrive in a green envelope, and there's an example on this page of the presentation. Next slide, please. So I want to stop here for two reasons. One, to let you know that since the pandemic has started, my staff and I have been in constant communication with the elections department and the administrator, Ms. Lisa Wise, and we have been sending ideas and ensuring that she and her staff have what they need to make sure that we have a successful election in November. And I also wanted to see if anybody has any questions at this point. Okay. So we'll go to the next slide. Regardless of whether people want to vote by mail or in person, the elections department has been hard at work, and the Commissioner's Court has helped financially to ensure that voting is going to be safe. Next slide. Or sorry, go back to the other slide. Some of the precautions, there we are. Precautions and prevention tactics include social distancing. Poll workers will maintain 6 feet of distance from each other and the voter when possible. Masks are going to be something that's important. All workers will be provided masks and face shields. Voters will be encouraged to wear masks, but legally cannot be denied the ability to vote or not wearing for not wearing a mask. Sorry, masks will be available in limited supply at each polling location. If someone forgets or would like one, there's going to be a Vote Safe El Paso kit. Each voter will get a kit that'll have hand wipes, a marking utensil like a large Q-tip, a finger cut, and a sticker. And then we're going to have clean teams. And so at each polling site, we'll have staff that's specifically dedicated and responsible for sanitizing the location throughout the day. Next slide, please. So some specifics about early voting. Early voting is going to run from October 13th through the 30th. There are going to be 35 early voting polling places across the county. And at my request, 10 of those locations are going to be open until 10 p.m. during the last week of early voting from the 26th to the 30th of October. Next slide, please. I also advocated and urged that we expand and improve curbside voting. To be clear, all polling locations will have curbside voting as an option. However, these locations will have express curbside, meaning folks can drive up and request to vote in their car without having to wait for somebody to come out. There will be clear signage at these locations with the instructions on how to request this. Next slide, please. And finally, I just wanted to remind you all that straight ticket voting is no longer a thing. Voters will have to run through the ballot, so it's highly encouraged for folks to download a ballot and check it out before going to vote. If you are, you are certainly allowed to take a pre-marked sample ballot in with you if to vote. Also, so you're aware, an advertising campaign with all of this information will begin in October to ensure El Pasoans are aware of changes, safety precautions, and are generally well informed for the November elections. And just one more thing that I wanted to mention, which is something that we worked on in my office for quite a while and has to do with election day, is that we are going to be having vote centers. And this is the first time in El Paso County that we'll have vote centers. So that means election day will be just like early voting, which means you can go anywhere there's a voting location, a polling site, and cast your vote. So I believe there will be 150 polling locations throughout the county on election day. And so folks they no longer have to go to the precinct that they are registered in, and they can actually go to any polling site and cast their vote. It's been a project that's been about a year and a half or 2 years in the making, and I'm very proud that we have that option beginning this general election in November. I believe that may be all we have. Make sure my contact information is on this slide, and if you have any questions or concerns or anything that you need information about what we went over or anything in the future, please get in contact with my office. Carlos Martinez is one of my staffers, as well as Stephen Elsesser, and they will most likely be answering the phone there, 915-546-2111. And you can get in contact with us as well by writing us through email at commissioner2@epcounty.com. So that's all I have for my presentation. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but thank you very much for the opportunity to present this information to you.
I do want to say thank you for always being a champion of voter access in El Paso. I know, and I feel like I can speak for everyone here on the Zoom and everyone watching. It's really nice to be able to rely on you to always, do what's best for the voters in El Paso. So I just wanted to thank you for that and for for volunteering your time to do this presentation and just engaging in our community. So thank you so much.
Certainly, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you all for the opportunity.
Thank you. With that being said, we're going to go. What was that? Was that Daisy? With that being said, we're going to go ahead and slide on into our Q&A portion. So before we begin, I do want to say that I just want to acknowledge that until voting is accessible to all, regardless of gender expression, race, socioeconomic status, we cannot confidently claim that voting is liberating or a solution to all of our problems. Voter suppression is real and it affects hundreds of thousands of people each year. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start off with our first question. This question is going to be for the whole panel. And I'm going to start with Trayshawn, then Daisy, Elizabeth, and then Sabrina. So the question is, what are some of the biggest challenges voters will face this election season due to COVID-19?
Hey everybody, Trayshawn Pate again. I personally think that a couple of the biggest challenges that we've seen so far is obviously the fact that not everyone is able to vote by mail. So they're not necessarily able to take the precautions that they may feel like they need to take in order to stay safe. Luckily, lots of counties across the state of Texas are ensuring that voting in person is safe. They're opening up more locations and things like that. I know this question was about challenges, but I'd like to try to be empowering and say that, like, even though things are a little bit difficult, there are a lot of options to make voting easy and accessible for everyone. I think the amount of polling locations that we'll have available during early voting, as well as on election day, will actually make that a lot smoother, so that hopefully lines are not as long and PPE that is being provided is also a positive. So
I hate to be the one to say things like this, but Textberg ran a report for the March 3rd primaries, and during that report, it was that there's a 46% chance possibility that polling locations are going to be understaffed, which is going to lead to polling place closures and consolidation, which is a big deal, especially if you're relying on public transportation to get to your polling station. A big challenge is going to be lines are inevitably going to be longer because you're going to have to keep that 6 feet distance. Maybe a place that used to have 6 machines will only be able to have 3. So you're cutting technology in half. Also, besides poll worker shortages, just the fact that the state has done little to nothing to ensure that, poll workers and voters are safe during the election is like, we are facing probably one of the most difficult elections, but I have faith in the people of Texas and people across the United States that they will take care of each other and that they will follow safe CDC guidelines.
I agree with both Trishan and Daisy. Definitely, the mail ballots and actual locations, whether they're staffed, is going to be very important. But I think all of that is going to affect voter turnout in general. And I think that's something that we definitely have to keep an eye out in this election, and trying to do as much as possible to encourage people to vote despite being in the middle of a pandemic. Trying to inform them that there are things in place that are going to be taken into account for their safety, because I think in general, people are just going to feel nervous or scared to just want to hit the polls. I mean, right now, it's even just hard for anybody to go out and vote. Like, voter turnout is so low, especially here in El Paso. So I think that's something that one of the challenges definitely that we're going to be seeing a lot this year.
Elizabeth just nailed exactly what I was going to say. I think that there's a really big disconnect between like all of these changes that we're making, but like getting that information to people who need it most, I think is going to be a really big challenge. I know that like a lot of the progressive orgs that we work for, as well as the county, is trying to push like getting this information to folks on social media. Like, we're trying to make sure that it's accessible, but I do think that we're forgetting that a large portion of voters that don't vote in El Paso don't have access to like the technology that we do. Like, there's a disconnect here statistically of people who are politically engaged and people who don't have access to like technology and access to like this type of information. So I think that a really big challenge is going to be making sure that, the entire population here gets the information needed. Like, we've been able to sit through a presentation with like Commissioner Stout. We've gotten to know that the county is making these changes. And I'm happy to hear that they're making a campaign to get that information out to the public, because I truly feel like the biggest challenge is going to be misinformation and educating the public on really these changes that we're talking about, which is why I think it's so important that, we're having conversations about like the county mailing in stuff to people, like providing them with those specific kits. Like, those changes are amazing, but I think that we really face like a social challenge getting it to the people who need to know it the most.
Thank you so much. And I think it's really important to talk about the disconnect between voters. Again, we already have low voting turnout in El Paso. So to have a pandemic added to that is extremely unfortunate. So the next question, I'm going to switch up the order, and it's going to be Elizabeth, Sabrina, Daisy, and then Trishan. And the question is, what services are your organizations offering to help voters during this time?
Yeah, so just a little bit of a background of what our organization is. We started Know My Ballot with the idea of just trying to provide educational information, political information to our community. We saw that we were lacking a lot about that, especially in a nonpartisan and unbiased way. So our goal is to basically just become a one-stop shop for all voters where they can get all their information. And the great thing also is that we're translating all this information in Spanish. We're a predominantly Latino population here in El Paso, and I think being able to provide that information in Spanish is very helpful as well. So what we want to do is we want to be able to provide the public and the community with informed information about who's running for what and what their position and how it affects them. So they can see like which candidates are the ones that align best with their values, and they can make the most informed decision at the polls.
So the whole, the pandemic has really, I think, opened up a lot of organizers' eyes to like the accessibility portion of organizing. Like for the longest time, like organizers have done like events as outreach, like lit drops as outreach. But now that we don't have that, we're really trying to strategize and, get more digital, see ways that we can still integrate the community. So right now we're going through that transition. I know that this time last year, what our org was doing, we were like doing lit drops like on campuses. Like we partnered with Senator Rodriguez's office to like talk to high schoolers about how important it was. And now that we don't have that face-to-face community, we're facing that learning curve of trying to go digital, but recognizing that not everybody has the privilege to go digital in the first place. So what we're trying to do on our end is our organization is currently working on, we're trying to do like the whole infographic thing that a lot of folks are trying to do as well. We know that we're an organization that targets young people, and young people tend to resonate a lot with like social media and stuff like that. We're doing online voter guides. Right now, we're currently working on the mayoral one, and then we're going to try and get into voter guides for like city council races. So the biggest thing that we're trying to do right now is just try and inform people as much as possible. I'm like really yearning to go back to when we could physically hand out information about polling locations and candidates. But right now we just can't do that because it's selfish of us to put other people at risk trying to get that information to them. So right now we are in the process of like a learning curve when it comes to remote organizing. But I think that thus far we've had a really good engagement increase online from campaigns that are engaging people about like different social justice issues as well as voting. So that's where we're at right now, and it has been working. So hopefully we can keep it up before Election Day.
So the main thing that we do during election season at Common Cause is run our election protection program, which deals with nonpartisan poll monitors. So basically, these are people who feel compelled to help others make sure that they're not being denied the access to voting for whatever reason. So this year, in the midst of COVID-19, we have spiced up our program a little bit, if you will, to include roving monitors, expansion of our roving monitor program, which would be people that are assigned a certain set of polling places to go visit to make sure that they opened on time, that machines aren't broken, and that there are no long lines forming. And if they are forming, that they are moving swiftly. There's also social media monitors, which will be monitoring for misinformation and disinformation happening on Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, you name it, ensuring that people are receiving accurate information about voting, and in-person poll monitors, which will be standing following CDC guidelines with a face mask outside a certain amount of polling stations, ensuring that things are working as they should be happening. So if you do feel compelled to help out, it would be amazing. I know Trayshawn is part of the coalition. Trayshawn and ACLU are part of the coalition. So protectthevote.net, and you can sign up for a training. It's only a couple of hours of your time, and you get to help your community and meet the moment where it's at, and just it's super empowering to know that you are able to help others.
Right on. So with the ACLU, we tend to focus really heavily on Know Your Rights trainings. So we now, in the time of COVID, we're actually doing all these trainings virtually. So we're reaching out to multiple different organizations as well as college campuses and stuff like that to just keep people informed as far as what their rights are when it comes to voting. We do some basic trainings kind of similar to the one that the commissioner just did. We're also working with Common Cause and TCRP when it comes to election protection things, especially with the poll monitor program. So I think that's pretty much about it. Oh, we're also working on some litigation when it comes to translations as far as like the voter information that is out there. Currently, I think it's 69 or 70 different counties don't have translations of their voter information in Spanish or other languages, or they do have it, but it's just like incorrect translations. So we're actually trying to make sure that everyone can have access to the information that's out there.
That's all amazing and in different ways. So I just want to say I appreciate every single one of you and the work you're doing to protect voters. This next question is, and we'll start off with Trishawn, then Daisy, Elizabeth, and then Sabrina. There have been questions about types of acceptable IDs, example, student IDs. What types of identification can be used at the polls?
That's a great question, actually. So there are 7 different types of identification that is accepted at the polls. Unfortunately, student IDs are not one of them. A driver's license issued by DPS, an election identification certificate, an ID card, concealed handgun license, military identification with a picture, a U.S. citizenship certificate with a picture, and a U.S. passport. Those are going to be the 7 forms of ID that you can use.
And I mean, Trishawn already named them all, but as someone that formerly worked as an election worker, there are also supplemental forms of ID, especially right now during COVID-19, where DPS is only open to appointments. So you can take a supporting form of ID and sign an affidavit claiming, like, ensuring that it is you that is voting. So valid supporting forms of ID are your valid voter registration certificate, which is when you register to vote in 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the influx of registrations, you will get a little card in the mail. You could take that, sign the affidavit. It's a form of ID. You could also take your original birth certificate, a current copy of a utility bill, a copy of a bank statement, an original government check, or a copy of an original paycheck, and a copy of an original government document with your name. And if it has a picture of you, it has to be the original. And I also know that there are certain instances where people who are 69 and older can take an expired form of ID as long as they prove that extenuating circumstances prevented them from renewing their ID.
Yeah, I mean, they hit all of the ID requirements, but I do want to mention, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, that if you don't have an ID, and there's really like a big impediment for you not having an ID, you can fill out a provisional ballot. What this means, basically, like, you just fill out this ballot, and 6 days after filling out this ballot, you have to go and present an actual photo ID in the presence of the county voter registrar. That way your ballot can actually be counted.
Yeah, so at the end of it, everybody pretty much nailed everything about the forms of ID. What I will say is that for a really long time, there has been a lot of conversation about changing that at the state level. I know that, like, every year progressive lawmakers try and either expand that or provide exemptions like a student ID, and it constantly gets shot down at the state level in the Texas Ledge. So while everybody nailed everything, I will just leave you with, these are conversations that are being had, like changing this at the state level is something that is a reality if people vote for legislators who believe in that same type of thing. So that is something I think that we should keep in mind as well.
Thank you so much. I know I learned some things today just with that alone, so thank you. I want to give this to Sabrina and Elizabeth. What changes has El Paso County made in preparation for this upcoming election? I know we heard Commissioner Stout, but I just want to see if you guys have any updates.
Yeah, so Commissioner Stout obviously is like the best resource we had today, like giving us direct info about work that he's doing at the county level, which I think is really good. I think that something that is what I think was really good was, you know, the pandemic first started when we were having like an upcoming election, right? We had to delay like the elections that we were having like in March, April, like that time of year got pushed back at the state level, you know? So I would say that I think El Paso County did adjust well in doing curbside voting since then, you know? Our county was quick to do that. I know that other counties in the state of Texas did not provide those types of accommodations. So I will say that you know, with what we were given at the state level of kind of like figure it out yourself, I think that El Paso County has done a really good job. You know, thankfully we do have like really good county commissioners like Stout, who has constantly advocated for voter protection. What I do think is really, really cool this time around is that we're actually having like personal vote safe, like El Paso kits. I think that a big question that people have when going physically in person to the polls is like, am I going to be physically safe? You know, there is like a conversation around like, am I going to be provided like a mask potentially? Like, do I have to touch the machine? Like the fact that they've thought logistically about like having those masks on deck, having like options for people who don't want to go in person. I just think that like we really have emphasized that we want to protect as many people as possible as a county. So I do again like want to say that like our county has done a really good job. What I personally think needs to be done moving forward is like we had previously mentioned, like in October, we really need to hit getting that information out to people, because although the county is doing a good job making these decisions, we really have to make sure the county is on top of pushing it. And like people like us have to go around and share that with people who might not know as well. So like good changes are happening. The county's doing like those voter accommodations in person as well as curbside options. But again, like getting that information about changes to people in the county is what I think needs to take priority. So overall, like that is what I just think. I like can't speak highly. I cannot speak highly enough about like the work that's been done to get people like accommodated at the polls. So I'm a big fan of the county's changes.
Yeah, I agree with everything Sabrina said, and especially the fact that early voting has been expanded, for one more week. So it's starting on October 13th. I think that's definitely an option that voters should definitely look into, especially if you're very nervous about the pandemic or about like being safe. Usually during early voting, there's less people voting, so you won't have to deal, with the long lines. And it's also a great change about it is that now you can actually just vote anywhere, not just the precinct you're supposed to vote, that Commissioner Stout was mentioning before. So like before in early voting, you were able to vote in any location. And now that has been changed like on actual election day to vote in any location. And I think that's a great change. Because sometimes, like you change your address, or maybe you didn't even change your voter registration address, and you have to go back to that precinct that you used to live. And that's something I do want to like mention, is that people sometimes think they can't vote because their address on their ID is different than the one they're living in now. But Texas doesn't require like an address requirement. So that just means as long as you're registered to vote, like, and you have an ID with your picture, you can vote. So I think that's something that people need to be more aware of.
Thank you so much. Now this one's going to be for Trayshawn and Daisy. What changes has the state made in preparation for this upcoming election?
So Elizabeth actually just mentioned the biggest one is the extra week added on to early voting. The state, sorry. I'm trying to be as positive as possible. Honestly, the state hasn't really done too much outside of that. I think that's actually all that I'm thinking of right now. I'm sorry, just completely blanked.
No, you're completely right, Trayshawn. The state, aside from adding a week of early voting, has done nothing to make sure that voters are safe. So really, like, I know masks are optional, but like I really encourage y'all, like voting isn't gonna take more than 5 minutes. Like do it for your fellow voters who might have people who are at risk at home. So just be nice to each other, and like we're all in this together. So we're all in this together, and we'll get through this together.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the transparency in what the state has and hasn't done. I'll also appreciate the vocals, Daisy. But yeah, I just thank you for being honest. I think Texas is like probably one of the worst, if not the worst state regarding voting access, voting suppression, like anything with voting or anything in general. Texas just isn't the best. We do have a comment from Commissioner Stout, and he says, one more thing y'all might mention that we advocated for and will be done is all of the non-contested races will be moved down the ballot. below the contested races. That way, if the ballot is really long and people get fatigued, they will see the contested races first. So thank you for that. I didn't know that. That is pretty awesome. I know that, especially with so many local races happening here in El Paso, and then it being a presidential election, and we don't have the option to just, do Dem or Republican down the ballot. I think that's incredibly important to know. So thank you so much, Commissioner. For the next question, I want to give it to Elizabeth and Trayshawn. And there's been a lot of conversation about vote by mail. What do voters need to know about casting mail-in ballots?
Yeah, so Commissioner Stout did a really great job in presenting this information, but just to reiterate, Texas is what we call an excuse state. What that means, basically, like to order a mail-in ballot, you need to have a reason why you're requesting it. So it's either if you're 65 years or older, you have an illness or disability, you will be out of El Paso County on election day. So for example, I have family members that are serving in the military and they're stationed somewhere else, but are registered here in El Paso. They would be able to request a mail-in ballot. And if you're incarcerated but eligible to vote, you have to basically first be registered to vote. Then you fill out this application to get a ballot sent to you. I want to say that also mail-in ballots are known as absentee ballots. So just know that those two things are the same. Once you fill out the application, you mail it back in, and then they'll send you the ballot. Like Commissioner Stout said, they has to be received by October 23rd, not postmarked. So you need to get those applications in as soon as possible.
Right on. And also to piggyback on that, I just want to flag that I'm sure people know about the vote by mail litigation that we sent up, and it was actually determined that a lack of immunity to COVID alone does not constitute a disability. However, people do have the option to consider their own personal pre-existing conditions and weigh that with the threat of COVID as a reason for why they are voting by mail. So and again, people cannot, despite what the Secretary of State threatens to do, an election administrator or a county clerk or whoever cannot follow up with someone and pretty much ask, why are you putting in this mail-in ballot? So outside of just checking sick or disabled, that's pretty much it. So I do want to keep have people keep that in mind when considering your own personal pre-existing conditions and things like that, as vote by mail is a thing right now. So
can I jump in really quick? Because I think that something just came to mind. I know I wasn't addressed for the question, but we as an org, we do work with other college chapters all over the state of Texas. And a group of people that often get left behind in the conversation, especially now, are folks that live in Texas, but go to a different institution in the state and don't realize that they either need to get a mail-in ballot from their home county or update their registration in their new county, right? So I just want to do a little plug. If you're a college student who might be doing say you're a UT student, right? And you're in El Paso taking your classes. If you've lived there before, you need to pick your registry. I know that my cousin, she lives in Austin. She was confused about the process. If you're a college student, you need to either update your registry, pick a mail-in ballot from your home county, just make sure that you know that you have the most recent updated voter registration status, because you might miss the deadline for requesting your mail-in ballot.
Thank you so much. That is incredibly important to add, so thank you. And this one is for Daisy and Sabrina, but again, if any of you have anything to add, please feel free to do so. What efforts can we make moving forward to help fight voter suppression in Texas?
So I think voter suppression happens at a lot of levels. And I think one of them is kind of feeling voter disenfranchisement. So I really recommend creating a voting plan, early voting. You can vote basically anywhere in the county. And another thing you can do is volunteer to be a poll monitor at protectthevote.net. I know that it can really make the difference between someone being able to vote or not. You can report problems and they will be you will be sent to the hotline. And yeah, I think besides doing that, I think the best thing you can do to fight voter suppression in Texas is signing up to be an election worker. There is a shortage of election worker, and I know, like, as someone that used to do it for fun, there's nothing better than making sure that people who want to make sure people are able to vote easily are working as election workers. So I know Sabrina can probably expand on that.
No, you did great. Like, you did amazing. I think the poll worker, like, a lot of people don't realize that they can still help in that capacity, right? So I had this conversation with Dom actually yesterday about how cyclical fighting voter suppression is, because realistically, you can't fight voter suppression until you start electing people who believe in, like, expanding voting, right? I think that it's a horrific cycle. Like, Dom opened up this panel the best by explaining, like, we have to stop thinking that, like, voting is the only form of, like, liberation to what we need, because we obviously have folks in office who don't care about expanding voting access to literally anybody. So, like, I was really sitting hard on this one, because fighting voter suppression, like, you can fight it on the outside level. Like, if you are a non-voter, like, you can join abolition movements, you can work with community organizing and helping, like, communities that need what our government isn't giving us, right? But it's like, realistically and unfortunately, the only way to help dismantle voter suppression at the state level especially is for voting for people who believe in, like, most often progressive politics, which is, like, I don't think that partisanship should come into play when it comes to expanding voter access, but that's unfortunately, like, the state of Texas politics. So, like, fighting voter suppression, there are many, many layers to it. And of course, like, you have to consider, we live in El Paso, we have folks who just aren't eligible to vote, right? So we have a population here that can't help fight voter suppression because they're not eligible to, right? So I think in that regard, Daisy's right with getting involved in volunteering. I know that our organization, if we have folks that aren't able to become VDRs because either they're not citizens or any other, like, different existing issue, we have them do voter pledges with us to help talk to people about voting, right? I wish I could give, like, a more positive answer, like Trayshawn said, about, like, you know, we can do it, but, like, realistically, voter suppression is cyclical. That's why we're having a panel like this, to help people understand that they need to start electing people who believe in dismantling it.
And I think it's super important. It goes, like, with getting the right people elected into office. And Texas is heading into the leg session in 2021. So I think if there is a better time to fight for, you know, voting right expansion, it is coming up in January. Become plugged in. I know ACLU is a great org, Texas Rising is a great org, Common Cause is a great org. And I know Your Ballot is gonna do, you know, their best to help people be as informed about what's happening in the ledge. I think we take for granted, because for some of us, voting is, you know, we show up and we're able to do it, but there are many people who cannot do it due to socioeconomic barriers, due to little things, due to misspelled names on their things, due to voter purges. So I think one of the best things we can do to fight suppression is be informed. Check your voter registration. If you haven't done it in a while, check it now. Make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure that people that you know are eligible to register to vote are registered to vote. And if you know some friends that might not have access to, you know, transportation to the poll, you know, volunteer and give them a ride. Like, again, all of this boils down to, we can solve these issues if we work together, if we keep each other informed, and if we're there for each other. So
just real quick, going off of what Daisy said, I mean, it's definitely important to, you know, keep people informed. And I think, you know, the number one tool we have is just to bring awareness to when elections are happening, and keeping people informed. And I think it's really important to disseminate that information also in that person's language. Because sometimes the language is such a barrier that people don't feel included in the electoral process. And I think that by targeting, specific groups in their language is going to help a lot of that as well.
I wanted to add just one more thing. I think we could talk about this for forever, right? We all like, this is what we do, like this is what we work toward dismantling, right? And I think that something really big that I just want to like nail in that Daisy had mentioned, the Texas Ledge, you really, really, really have to keep an eye out for policies and like types of policing that they're trying to push through, like legislation that criminalizes some forms of voting. I know that like last legislative session, I was actually with Daisy in Austin and we were freaking out because the Texas Ledge, some legislators from like a random part of Texas, right, were trying to push potentially like, I believe it was fining folks for giving more than a certain amount of people rides to the polls. Like it really, I wish I could be more positive about it, but when we're going into the legislative session, you really need to be vigilant and keep in mind that we live in a voter suppressive state. And at the end of the day, if we want it, we're unfortunately gonna have to fight for it because our current legislators aren't going to give it to us.
So many things came to mind hearing you all speak. First of all, Elizabeth, Know Your Ballot was mentioned in a panel I was involved with earlier today. So just know that your hard work that the organization is doing is definitely being noticed. And something that you said about language being a barrier. I think, and I've spoken to Daisy about this, one of our many FaceTime nights, that the language in legislation itself is definitely a form of voter suppression. Legislation isn't written so that, regular citizens can understand it. So when it comes to voting for elected officials who either support this piece of legislation or not, it's very hard. And I'm sure if it's already discouraging for folks who know English, right? I can't even imagine how discouraging it can be for someone who doesn't speak English. So I just wanted to say thank you for bringing that up. Language is a huge barrier when it comes to access of any kind. I do want to go back to the poll monitoring because, and please, like, if I'm wrong, please tell me, but every time I've gone to vote, whether it's, I think I've only done early voting. I don't think I've ever done election day, maybe once, but a lot of times our poll workers are older people. And so with this pandemic happening, and our numbers are still not at a great area, I guess. How can we encourage younger folks who aren't as at risk of negatively being impacted by this virus? How can we encourage them to do volunteering like this so that the older generations don't risk their lives for something like this?
I think one of the things that has driven me to be as passionate about the work that I do is that older people like to call, millennials and Gen Z the generations that don't care. And I think this is a great way to show them, put our money where our mouth is. Like, we do care. We care about you. We care about, voting. And so I think it's a great way to show your community that you love it. There's nothing better than making sure that polling places aren't closed on election day. So just think, be a good neighbor. Would you like your neighbor to tell you, if you left your door open? Of course you would. So make sure that, if you feel compelled to want to help your community, it's a one-day commitment. And if you have the time, early voting, it's a 3-week commitment, and you get paid for it if you're an election worker. So what better way to do something that is rewarding, but also monetarily rewarding. So it's a win-win situation, right?
Thank you so much. Yes. Especially during a pandemic, go get your coin, because I know some people are out of a job, or they don't have enough hours. So this, like you said, put your money where your mouth is. This is a perfect opportunity to show that you care for your community, care about voting access and voting rights, and also taking care of our older community here in El Paso. Does anyone have anything to add or anything they want to talk about that wasn't in the question portion before we move on?
I will just add to what Daisy said. The price is actually increased per hour. I mean, if you want to think of it as kind of like hazard pay, I guess it technically is. I know that if you're a poll worker in El Paso, you're going to get paid $12 an hour, which I think is really helpful considering that like there are a lot of folks that have been laid off and are unable to work right now. I think that that's something really, really good. I know that a project, so Texas Rising, here we have like two subsets of advocacy groups. I know that the portion of advocacy that I do is really in person and direct with folks, but we also have a team that's designated to strictly contacting voters. And right now they're trying to recruit a lot of young poll workers. I will agree with you, Dom. It's not easy to get those types of people to sign on. I know that one of our close like chapter members who's been doing that type of work has only recruited 6 in like the entire time that she's been trying to get some. So a plug, if you're interested in becoming a poll worker, like our org can connect you to how to sign up and things like that. So we're trying and it's really hard. But at the end of the day, like, again, I had mentioned it before. I do think that there's a form of like feeling guilty when it comes to like, I want to do this, but I'm also going out into public and putting people potentially at risk. So it's really up to you. Like if it sits well with you, you should really consider becoming a poll worker. But if not, like, I don't think we should really be pushing folks to like risk it if they're not able to.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So I'm going to hand this over to JJ, because we haven't gotten any questions, and the question we did get, you all answered. So I'm going to pass it over to JJ. He has some announcements to make.
Hi, everybody. I really quickly want to thank all of our panelists for jumping on. You all are amazing. You all are doing such amazing work. And so I really encourage anybody watching, which is a good number of you watching, to please go and follow the ACLU, go follow Common Cause, go follow Know Your Ballot, go follow Texas Rising. You all are doing great work, and we're really grateful for the work and glad to partner with you all, especially during these very difficult voting times. And so we appreciate everything that you all are doing. And to anybody watching, I would first and foremost encourage you to please go become a poll worker. Make sure that you get your friends and family to go out and vote. You know somebody that might not be, maybe isn't going to vote. They're not sure if they are, but their vote matters, and so does yours. And so please encourage them to go out and vote, especially your older folks. Make sure that they get a mail-in ballot, absentee ballot, and make sure that you know your ballot. To borrow the title of our friend organization here, make sure that you stay informed and that you are plugged in. I know that things are really crazy right now and it's overwhelming sometimes. But we're here as Young Dems. Texas Rising is there for you. Know Your Ballot is there for you. The ACLU is there for you. Common Cause is there for you. And if you have any questions about voting, please reach out to us. I know that we are all ready to help you in anything that you may need. And so thank you all again. I want to thank Commissioner Stout for jumping on. Great presentation. Always grateful for his work. And I just want to invite everybody to our mayoral debate, which is going to be next week on the 24th, live streamed right here, wherever you're watching. It's going to be with Carlos Galinad and Veronica Carvajal. And I know that Know Your Ballot is going to be doing some candidate events as well. And so we're really looking forward to all of those. So thank you all again for joining us. Thanks, Dom. Love you so much for moderating all of this. And yes, if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to reach out. And that's it from all of us. And so see you all later. Have a great night. Thanks so much.
Everyone, thank you.